don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that anytime we upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thank you.
Hallelujah. I give him praise and honor to Jehovah God, thanking him for our lives, thanking him for strength and good health and this opportunity that he has given us to worship before him on this holy day. We thank him for protecting the children of Israel throughout the earth and giving us this opportunity to acknowledge that he alone has created all things. For we acknowledge that this day is holy because he made this day holy. We acknowledge that he is a holy God and he has made us a holy people. So we pray that he will continue to be with us, that he will strengthen us and allow us to persevere even during these times, that we would be able to survive. And hopefully it is during this generation that he will allow the children of Israel to return to the land that he has given us as an inheritance, as a possession. Because once, we went through reading through the book of Ezekiel, and we are also going to see in comparison as we get through the book of Exodus that Jehovah God desires to dwell among the children of Israel. So we know that because we have committed iniquities, transgressions, and sins, we have been separated from him, even though he continues to stretch out his hand towards us to receive us. We just have to stretch out our hands unto him, pray to him, so that we will receive him. For we know that he's the one that continues to watch over all of us. So at this time, we're just going to briefly discuss the portion Shemot, the beginning of the book, which is known also as Exodus. It's called Exodus because it details the children of Israel coming out of the land of Egypt. As it is said in the popular song Exodus, the movement of Yah people. So we read about that in the book of Exodus. So that's why the book was called Exodus. But for the Tanakh, for the purposes of the Tanakh, or the Holy Scriptures, is known as the book of Shemot, which means names. Shemot means names. And it receives that name because at the beginning of the chapter, it details the names of the children of Israel. It details the name of Yaakov. It details the names of his sons as they went into the land of Egypt, which we read about towards the end of the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis. And it also lets us know, as we receive those names, or we read the names of the 12 sons of Yaakov, that we also have to realize that, obviously, being that they're the 12 sons of Yaakov, that they are brothers. So we also have to realize that as Jehovah God put this nation together, it wasn't an amalgamation of different groups of people. It wasn't an amalgamation of different tribes from various places that Jehovah God put together to say that you are now my people. We have to realize that we all have one Father. So the person that you look to, that's next to you, that's your brother or that's your sister. And that's how we have to look at it. So when we, once again, we read the names, and we're also going to read names later on in the book of Exodus as well, when it starts to detail the children of, particular tribes, that we have to realize once again that we are brothers and sisters. So once again, it's not just a group of people that Jehovah God decided to put together from various places. Many countries on the face of this earth today are just migrations of various people. And they come together, they make an agreement, they make a pact, they make a constitution, and they say we are a nation. That's not how Jehovah God made the children of Israel. He made the children of Israel the children of Israel. And he selected the children of Yaakov, whose name he changed to Israel, to be his people. But it was a period of time that we dwelt within Egypt. And it wasn't, that long, because we read that there was a new Pharaoh that came up in Egypt and saw that the children of Israel were getting too numerous. But it wasn't too far away from Joseph himself, because at the end of the book of Genesis, we read that Machir was born upon Joseph's knees, or Joseph was able to see Machir. We know that Machir was of the generation that came out of Egypt to go into the desert. So it wasn't like it was hundreds of years that took place between the end of the book of Genesis to where we're going to be discussing today for the book of Exodus, in terms of this new king of Egypt, or this new Pharaoh of Egypt that came up and saw that, or it says that he did not know Joseph, but it was just a few years, and probably just the next succession in terms of pharaohs or the king of Egypt. So as time goes on, the children of Israel proliferated within the land of Egypt, and as per usual, people were afraid of us. So Pharaoh was afraid, and it says that the children of Israel may join with the enemies of Egypt if the enemies of Egypt, or army of another nation, or armies of other nations, were to come into Egypt to wage war against Egypt. So they didn't want to completely destroy us, because they wanted to keep us to fulfill their needs, but they wanted to make sure that our population was controlled. So genocide is something that has always been inflicted upon the children of Israel, and we have to realize that we should not play into the genocide that is being put upon our people. Because as it goes on, it mentions that Pharaoh told the midwives, gave an edict to the midwives of the children of Israel, that when they saw children being born, that they were supposed to kill the males but keep the women alive. But the Hebrew midwives did not, follow the directives of Pharaoh. They did not keep up with that edict. So once again, there are going to be people that are going to be in the medical field. There are people that are going to be doctors. There are people that are going to be nurses. There are going to be people that are going to be orderlies. There are going to be people that are in the medical field that are of the children of Israel. But their interests should be the interests of Jehovah God and for the salvation of the children of Israel, and not for the destruction of the children of Israel as concerns with the nations that are put up over us at this time. So the Hebrew midwives did not listen to that edict, and they decided to continue to save the male children alive, even though they were told to kill them. So once again, those that are in the medical field, even during these times, we have to get the information that is going to be beneficial to us, that is going to save us, and not get the information that is going to propel the agenda that is put against us. Because once again, we do have many people that are doctors and that are nurses that give us the information that is going to save us, as opposed to harm us or hurt us, or once again continue the agenda that is put against us. So we do need those people that are in place that are going to get that information, let us know what's going on, let us know what the alternatives are, let us know that we are able to survive through whatever is inflicted upon us. But we know ultimately as a nation we have to pray to the Most High God, because we know that ultimately that's where our salvation comes from. And then we put the plan into action that is told to us, because the Most High God is going to work through those in the medical field, just like he worked through Shifra and Puah and the Hebrew midwives who saved the children of Yisrael. So when Pharaoh realized that didn't work, he just told the Egyptians, he told his own people, just go circulate throughout the children of Israel where they were dwelling, and if you see a young male child, just throw him in the river. And that just continued on with the genocide of the children of Israel, during that time. Also, once again, and not fulfilling the agenda of those that, want to inflict genocide upon us, because once again, that, just the killing of the male children of the male, the young male Hebrew children is akin to abortion, which is also an agenda that, of course, we know that abortion is done all throughout the world, but we know that when it comes to the children of Israel, of course, with the aspect of murder, we should not be doing that, but also, we should not be in fulfillment of the agenda of those that would like to inflict genocide upon us, and dwindling our numbers that are already dwindled in comparison to everybody else that is throughout the earth. So once again, those are the things that were taking place even during that time. And as the time goes on, it mentioned that in the book of Exodus that it mentions about Amram, who was a Levite, and it mentions, not by name at that time, but Jochebed, who was also a Levite, and they had a child that was born during this time when Hebrew sons were thrown in the river. And they saw that this child, of course, it was their child. They loved the child. They did, nobody, most people do not want to kill their children especially at birth. Most people do not want to do that. So they did what they could in order to hide the child. But as time went on and the child grew, and it was it mentioned that the child was quiet, but it still was too difficult to hide the child, because once again, Pharaoh had already given the edict to his people to go out throughout the children of Israel to destroy all the male children of the children of Israel, because once again the Hebrew midwives were not listening to what Pharaoh had to say, so they had to take matters in their own hands. So when it came to a point where they could not hide the child any longer, they took him, or the mother took him, made a it's called a teron in Hebrew, but like a small ark, made a papyrus, daubed it, so that it could float, put the child in it, put it in the river, and just hope for the best. And as a process of time, when that happened, the child ended up floating down the river into the midst of Pharaoh's daughter and her servants. So they saw the ark float in the river. Pharaoh's daughter sent one of her servants to go get it. They went and got it in the river, brought it to Pharaoh's daughter. She opened it up, saw that there was a child within it. The child started crying, and Pharaoh's daughter had compassion for the child. She knew automatically it was a Hebrew child, and she knew, of course, about the edict of destroying all the Hebrew males, but she had compassion for the child, and she kept the child. But as the blessing of the Most High was upon the child and upon the family of the child, Pharaoh's daughter at that time, the child's sister, which was watching the ark, float down the river, ended up in the midst of Pharaoh's daughter as well, and she asked if she can go and fetch someone to nurse the child for her. And of course, being that it's the child's sister, she went and got the child's mother. So the child's mother was able to nurse her own child, even after being afraid of what would happen to the child. So she was able to nurse her own child and receive payment for nursing her child and raising her own child, and getting paid once again by Pharaoh's daughter. But of course, with the terms of when the child gets of a certain age, that child would end up going back into the house of Pharaoh's daughter to be raised in Pharaoh's house. So Pharaoh's daughter called the child's name Moses, or Moshe, as it is pronounced in Hebrew, because he was drawn from the river. So that's where we get the name Moshe, or the name Moses, from, because that child was drawn from the water. Of course, it's a variation of a Egyptian word, but we know that great man Moses, as we will be hearing about from this week, even to the weeks to come, even until we get to the end of the book of Deuteronomy, and we know him to be the great man Moses, to where even the law, or the Torah that was given to us by Jehovah God, he also called it the Torah of Moshe. And that's just to differentiate, because as time went along among the children of Israel, we tend to make up our own rules, we tend to make up our own laws, we tend to make up our own commandments. But Jehovah God is always reminding us to go back to the Torah, go back to the commandments that he gave Moshe. And that's what we are supposed to be following. So this great man that was raised up in Pharaoh's house, all of the great men and women of the children of Israel, all the great prophets and prophetesses, were human beings that were blessed by the Most High. When we read in the Holy Scriptures, we don't read about celestial beings, coming amongst us and joining amongst us and doing things, along with us, other than giving a message of God and then going back to where they were sent. God uses human beings in order to fulfill the things that he once fulfilled among us and even amongst the world. He puts within human beings his word and places within them his Holy Spirit in order for them to move and to do the things that he has commanded them to do. So we receive things directly from the Most High God, but it's given into the hands of human beings. So we have to make ourselves ready. We have to prepare ourselves. We have to pray to the Most High God that he would utilize us to do his will, to do his good will, and to do the things that are right in his sight, that are beneficial for the children of Yisrael. So this child was raised once again in the house of Pharaoh. And as time went along, because the children of Israel were put under harsh bondage, because even before the genocide started, going back to the beginning of the book of Exodus, it also mentioned that the children of Israel were put into heavy bondage, into rigorous bondage, to build storehouses and treasure cities for the Egyptians. So this is during a time where it was, just harsh, and rigorous, slavery being imposed upon the children of Israel. So Moses went, to see the burdens of his people, because he realized who he is. He knows that he was born a Hebrew, even though he was raised in the house of Pharaoh. He knew exactly who he was, and he knew who his people were. So he didn't, even being raised in the house of Pharaoh, he did not even mentally separate himself from his own people, and definitely physically he did what he can to keep himself attached to his own people. So he went out to look upon the burdens of his people, and he saw on that particular day there was an Egyptian that was beating, a Hebrew. And what he did was, first of all, it angered him. He didn't like what he saw. He didn't like that people were treating, his brother. And once again, in relating to the fact that we received the names for the beginning of the chapter, that we have to realize that we are a family, that we are brothers and sisters. So even though it wasn't someone that was born of his same father or his same mother, he realized that that was his brother that was being beaten by a foreigner. And he did not like it. And he did whatever it was that he could in order to stop it. Of course, he took the necessary precautions before acting. He looked around to see, who was around. He saw that there was no one around, because, of course, he's not going to enact what he was about to enact in the sight of the Egyptians. So he made sure that that was the only Egyptian in sight. And he killed the Egyptian that was beating his brother, and then buried him in the sand. Then he went out on another day, as I said, the next day, to also continue to look upon the burdens of his people. And then he seen two Israelites arguing with one another. And also that was something that he did not like as well. But of course, in that situation, he wasn't going to go kill his brother for arguing with another one of his brother. He went to rectify the situation. So in going to rectify the situation, one of them said, well, who are you to judge us? Because that's something, we like to be judgmental, but at the same time, we don't like to be judged, especially when we are wrong. So he spoke to the one that was in the, Moses spoke to the one that was in the wrong, and the one that was in the wrong spoke up and said, well, who made you a judge and a ruler over us? And also threw in there, do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? So Moses knew that the situation that took place yesterday was known, and he said, well, I have to get out of here. So he fled from Egypt, because even at that time, even during that day, it mentioned that Pharaoh heard what Moses did. But Moses was able to get out of Egypt in time for, so that he would not be killed. So he ended up in the land of Midian as he fled from Egypt. On the way there, he, was sitting by a well, and he saw that there were, 7 women that went to feed the flock of their father. But there were some other, shepherds that were, harassing them at the time when they were trying to get, water for their flock. So Moses stood up. As you see, that this is something that was in the character of Moses, that when he saw that people were downtrodden, or people were in a position where they were being ruled over in a manner that he did not like, and he felt that it should not be done, he was going to put himself in a position to defend those who were defenseless. So he went and defended the women that went to water the flock of their father, and he drove the shepherds, that were harassing them away in however way or however method that he did so. And he helped water the flock. The women went back to their father. The father asked, well, how is it that you got back here so fast? Because, of course, this must have been something that was happening on a regular basis, that they went out to get water from the well. And the father knew that it was going to be a process. Nobody was going to actually harm them. Nobody was going to, kill them or beat them up. But it was always going to be a hassle. It wasn't going to be an easy task going out there every day to water the flock, because, the shepherds that were around were always going to harass them, slow them up. But they came back fast today, and they said, well, there was a Egyptian that came and saved us. And then the father said, well, why don't you bring him in? Because, when somebody does good for you, you should do good for them. So he's like, at least, bring him in, let him, have a meal, have something to drink, wash it, but do something. You don't just leave him out there because, they're in Midian. So if you say an Egyptian saved you, they're far away from Egypt. So something must be going on to where he must, either he's traveling and he needs some sort of assistance, some sort of help, but at least some food or, just somewhere to stay for the night if he's a traveler. And, something that is interesting and always important to note with that, and the fact that they recognized Moses, who was a child of Yisrael, as an Egyptian. And it's not to bring in the point of race in the Holy Scriptures, but people put the point of race in the Holy Scriptures when they discolor the people of the Holy Scriptures. So oftentimes when we read certain things and we get to certain points, we have to reiterate certain points just to let people know, well, if you know that the Egyptians were people of color and these Midianite women, mistook Moses, who was a child of Israel, as an Egyptian, that the children of Israel must be the same color as the Egyptians. He must have, of course, because he was raised in Pharaoh's house, he was wearing clothing that was Egyptian more than something that a shepherd would wear, or something that the children of Israel were wearing, or something that a nomad would be wearing. He was wearing Egyptian clothing. But if the children of Israel were a starkly different color than the Egyptians were, then the Midianite women would not have mistaken Moses as an Egyptian. They would have said that a British man saved us, or they would have said a German man saved us, but they said an Egyptian saved us. So that just shows you the proximity of the skin tone of the children of Israel to the Egyptians, to let us know the origins of not only the children of Israel, but to let us know the origins of the people that originally populated the earth as well. So Moses was brought into the house of Jethro. Also, his name was given to us as Reuel as first, but he was born into their house, and eventually, after the process of time, Reuel gave his daughter Zipporah to Moses to be wife. She married Moses. So he dwelt there for a period of time, tended to the flock of his father-in-law. It was taken care of, and everything was good with Moses. He was, dwelling there. He lived nice. He was, comfortable. That one day, he was feeding the flock of his father-in-law. Ended up on Mount Sinai because, as a shepherd, you have to go to different places in order to feed flock. You stay in one pasture too long, and then the grass, dwindles. You have to go somewhere else. So he ends up on what we know as Mount Sinai, and what Jehovah God got his attention there by sending an angel. Because once again, it says that an angel of Jehovah appeared as a bush that was burning, but the bush was not consumed. So when we think of the term angel, which we know in the Hebrew as malach, which means actually a messenger, is not always someone that has human distinctions or human characteristics, because it said that this burning bush was an angel or a messenger of Jehovah. So a messenger is going to be sent in any form that Jehovah God chooses. So this messenger of God was sent in the appearance of a bush that was on fire, but yet the bush itself was not consumed. And when Moses saw this, of course, it was something that was startling to him, because he saw the bush on fire, but he noticed that the leaves and the branches and nothing of this bush was actually being consumed by this fire. But yet this fire was continuing to burn. Fire burns when it receives fuel, and the fuel that fire receives to continue burning is whatever it is consuming. So this just shows us that the fire that came from God did not need any fuel in order to burn. And that was the sight that Moses, was startled by, and he was amazed by, and he went closer because he said he wanted to check this thing out. And as he got closer, Jehovah God called to him from this bush. It said the voice of Jehovah God called to him from the bush, called his name. he called his name, but he also told him, before you get any closer, take off the shoes or take off the sandals on your feet, because what you're standing on is holy ground. And this is where Moses began to receive his commission from Jehovah God on what he was born to do. The entire time where he was born, and his mother was afraid to, of course, kill him. His mother was afraid of what was going to happen, and he was put into the ark, put into the river, and sent. And Pharaoh's daughter found him and raised him in Pharaoh's house, and him being able to have an affinity to his brothers, and looking towards the burdens of his brothers, and killing an Egyptian on behalf of his brothers, and also trying to judge between his own brethren, and him being able to run away and get into Midian and be able to find peace in Midian and be a shepherd and be able to take care of those around him and take care of their flock. This is what Jehovah God raised Moses to be. So there are many things in our lives that we go through that are just preparation for what Jehovah God actually intends us to be. So Jehovah God appears to Moses, spoke to him, and let him know that he is to go into Egypt or return to Egypt, go to Pharaoh, and tell Pharaoh to let his people go. And Jehovah God also let him know that the Pharaoh and the people that were looking to kill him were no longer alive. But Moses was very reluctant to return to Egypt for various reasons, of course. Fear, and also because he was comfortable where he was. But Jehovah God told him that that was the job that he was sent to do. And no matter what Moses tried to say in order to get out of the job, Jehovah God pressed him and told him, this is what you're going to do. So even when Moses said that he was a man that, as we would know today, one that stutters, Jehovah God said, well, your brother speaks well. I'll send him with you because he can speak well. He'll speak for you. And no matter, once again, Moses tried to get out of that job. The Jehovah God said, he's going to give him some sign, because Moses was afraid that the children of Yisrael would not believe that Jehovah God sent him. So he gave him signs. He said, you had the staff in your hand, throw it down, and it became a serpent. He gave him the sign of putting his hand within, his robe and taking it out, and his hand turned white, leprous as snow, as it says, and he put his hand back and it returned to his other flesh. Another thing to notice as a distinction of the color of Moses himself, with his hand turned white and then turned back to his other flesh. But he gave him, Jehovah God gave him these signs to perform before the children of Israel, even turning water into blood, so that when he appeared to the children of Israel, he would perform these signs so that they would believe him. But what happened was Moses did not believe in himself. It wasn't that Moses did not believe in God, but Moses did not believe in himself. And Jehovah God, once again, had already strengthened him and already called him, just as we heard about earlier, that the prophet Jeremiah was called from the womb. That we have to realize that we are called into the service of Jehovah God for a reason. We may not know what that reason is, but through prayer and through proper application of the commandments, statutes, and judgments of God, that purpose will be revealed unto us. So we have to live righteously and we have to live good, so that Jehovah God will bless us and allow us the opportunity to fulfill the purpose that he wants us to fulfill. So no matter what Moses tried to do to get out of the job, he was already designated for the job by Jehovah God, and Jehovah God sent him on that mission. And what Moses did after that was just go to his father-in-law and ask for permission to go. So even though Jehovah God already commissioned him to go, Moses did not become arrogant. He was still a humble individual, as we will hear about his character later on in the Holy Scriptures. And he asked for permission of his father-in-law to go. He didn't just go back home and say, God spoke to me and I'm leaving. He asked for permission to go. The same person that took him in when he ran away from Egypt, when his life was in danger, the same person that took care of him, the same person that gave him, his daughter to wife. This is the same person that he felt it was necessary to ask for permission, and his father-in-law said, of course. If your God told you to go back, then go back. So they proceeded to go back, Moses and his wife and sons, and somewhere along the way, as it mentions that Jehovah God wanted to kill Moses, but it was because his son was not circumcised. So Zipporah circumcised the child, And after that, everything was okay. So even once again, once we are attempting to fulfill our purpose in life that Jehovah God commissions us to do, we still have to make sure that all of our T's and all of our I's are dotted and everything is taken care of. We have to make sure that we continue to keep the commandments, statute, and judgment. We cannot let up. We cannot become slack. We cannot just fall off. We have to be diligent. We have to be strong. We have to persevere. We have to continue on in doing the right things and doing the good things in the sight of Jehovah God, because no matter what we may feel that our mission is in life in terms of glorifying the name of Jehovah God and raising up or helping to raise up the children of Israel during this time, if we are not righteous, Jehovah God could take us out of here and put somebody else right in that place to fulfill the mission, but is also going to be living righteously before him. So once that was taken care of, Moses ended up in Egypt. He met with Aaron, his brother, who Jehovah God had already said was going to be sent with him to speak, because Aaron was able to speak, and if Moses was worried about his own speech, that Aaron would speak for him. And Aaron was already there in Egypt. He knew the elders, so Moses appeared before the elders of the children of Israel and told them that Jehovah God had sent him. And he performed the signs before them. And at that time, the children of Israel believed that Jehovah God was coming to give them salvation. We read, earlier in that, in the same portion, that the children of Israel were praying for the salvation, and that Jehovah God heard our cry, heard our prayers, heard our words in Egypt, and that's where the salvation was sent. But the salvation is not going to, as was not, just like it will not be, an overnight project. The children of Israel then had to be patient, just like we have to be patient. We see things happening around us today. We see the nations are in turmoil, just like Egypt was in turmoil, and as we will be reading in the weeks to come. And the children of Israel just had to be patient and just had to wait it out to see that salvation. So the children of Israel believed Moses at that time. The elders were happy. The people were happy that their prayers were answered, that Jehovah God was coming to deliver them. So now Moses went and appeared before Pharaoh and told Pharaoh that he was sent by Jehovah God to tell Pharaoh to let the children of Israel go. And Pharaoh, in his stubbornness, and Jehovah God had already told Moses at Mount Sinai at the burning bush that Pharaoh was going to be stubborn anyway, that he was going to harden his heart, and he would not let the children of Israel go except by a heavy hand, which Jehovah God was going to put upon Egypt. So the number one, or the first mistake and the worst mistake that Pharaoh did was say that he did not know Jehovah God. So from that point on, he put himself in a position to find out who Jehovah God is. So in the weeks to come, we'll be reading about how Pharaoh got to know who Jehovah God is. But what Pharaoh did at first was say that the children of Israel were idle, or basically he was saying that they were distracted. They were having too much time to rest. They were having too much time to heal themselves from the back-breaking slavery. And that's why they were able to say that they want to go into the wilderness or go into the desert to sacrifice before Jehovah God. So Pharaoh inflicted even a harsher punishment, a harsher, rules of slavery or rules of servitude upon the children of Israel. And as it was just mentioned, a few times earlier today already, that even during this time, even in order to work, in order to keep jobs, things are being put upon all of us that we just have to try to endure. Many people are losing their jobs. Many people are having their jobs threatened if they don't follow certain things. Same thing that we read about then, that they were told that they had to go make brick without straw. Their jobs were just made more difficult, but they just had to persevere. And as a result of that, Pharaoh decided to beat the taskmasters, who were actually Israelites, that were put over the children of Israel. The supervisors of the work were Israelites, and Pharaoh was beating them because the job was not getting done. And as a result of that, those supervisors, told Pharaoh that you put this extra measures upon us. You put these mandates upon us that we cannot fulfill. So how is it that you're beating us when the evil is with you? And then Pharaoh told them that because y'all have too much time to talk about, we're going into the desert to sacrifice to God. So the Israelites did, because they couldn't get over on Pharaoh, they took their frustration out on Moses. And when Moses tried to encourage them that they had to be patient, it says that they could not hear because of an impatient spirit. We have to learn not to be impatient even during this time. We have to learn that we have to stay strong and endure during this time, even though many of these things are being put upon us, that we know when we read about the salvation of Jehovah God. We read throughout the book of Ezekiel. We know that everything in the book of Ezekiel, chapters 40 through 48, will take place. That we will leave these lands of captivity, that we will return to the land of Yisrael. We will be rebuilding the house of God, and that Jehovah God will dwell amongst the children of Israel once again. But it's not going to be a process that's going to take place in one day. So, as we read about these things, and we see that the children of Israel were impatient of spirit, so they could no longer hear what Moses was telling them and what Aaron was trying to tell them. They blamed Moses and Aaron for the increase, or heaviness, or the rigorous bondage that was put upon them. So once again, these are the lessons that we have to learn from our own history, because as we read throughout the book of Exodus, we read through the book of Shemot, that these are events that actually took place. And Moses went to Jehovah God to say that, he was sent there. He did the job that he was sent to do. He spoke to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh didn't listen to him. The children of Israel are no longer listening to him. And Jehovah God reinforced within Moses that it's not within Moses' hand. It's not within anybody's hand except Jehovah God himself. And he said that he is the one that will reveal himself to Pharaoh and deliver the children of Israel. So once again, we have to be patient. And we have to realize that in our being patient, Jehovah God will save us, and he will deliver us from this captivity that we find ourselves in. And Jehovah God will deliver us through a strong hand and an outstretched arm, just as he did in the land of Egypt. But we just have to protect ourselves by believing in God and not letting all of the things being put upon us to cause us to lose patience or cause us to lose hope. We have to make sure that we are living upright in the sight of Jehovah God. So we thank Jehovah God for our lives. We thank him for strength. We thank him for good health and allowing us this opportunity to call upon his name. For regardless of what is happening, even today, regardless of what has been happening for the past 2 years, we continue to remember that Jehovah is God, and we continue to remember that we are the children of Israel. Meanwhile, on the flip side, and I know Chief Uziel is going to be speaking about the subject just now, that meanwhile, while the things are happening in the world today, that the gift that people want today is just life and good health. While if there was not this thing happening, people would be looking for gifts under a tree, but the gift that people want today is just life and good health. That's what people are worried about today, and that's Jehovah God causing people to take notice of him and not take notice of the things that they were used to taking notice of. Jehovah God is just covering all of the lies and covering all of the folly and covering all of the things that were distracting people of the world and taking that away from them, so that hopefully they would take notice of Jehovah God alone. So even on this day, once again, people are just happy to be alive, happy that their children are alive, and not too concerned with getting that race car under the tree today. But we thank the Most High God for allowing us to know the truth, allowing us to know that he lives, that he is the first and that he is the last, and that he will continue to bless the children of Israel, and that he is the one that will fulfill every word that he has spoken concerning the children of Israel. So once again, we thank Jehovah God for allowing us this opportunity to open up the book of Shemot, to begin reading the book of Exodus, and praying that he would deliver us. And of course, we know it's going to be in his time, but we pray that he would give us patience. So we ask also that he would allow his presence to be in all the houses of worship, all the places, all the homes that people are calling upon him today, and that he would teach us truth, that he would give us the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding necessary in order to survive and persevere during this time. So blessed be the name of Jehovah God forever. Hallelujah. Amen.